I can see that there's political expediency in trying to change this very old loophole to try and get rid of the problem. But if that doesn't work, then the British state will have to go about it another way and put the victims of this grooming gang first.
Pakistan is expected to refuse to take back the Rochdale Grooming gang leader, despite plans to change the law so he can be deported. Now, on Monday, the Home Secretary, Shabir Ahmed, is expected to announce changes to the 1971 Immigration Act, which, as it stands, prevents Shabir Ahmed from being removed. We can talk now to Sir Max Hill, the former Director of Public Prosecutions. Welcome to you, Max.
Hello, John.
What are your thoughts, Max? I mean, a law which, as it stands, prevents the deportation or removal of the leader of a rape gang, guilty of such appalling offences, it just seems to be such a glaring anomaly, Max, doesn't it?
Yes, look, the first thought of anybody sensible must be with the victims of this evil man and his gang. And frankly, if he continues to represent a risk to his victims, then it's on the British state to protect those victims. Likewise, if there is a lacuna, a gap in immigration legislation from 50 years ago, I don't have any difficulty, nor should many people, with the Home Secretary and Parliament filling that gap. However, John, I think there's a little more to this, as we'll no doubt go on to discuss, because there are some legal principles that have become rather confused along the way.
Yes. Well, okay. Well, let's just track back just for a moment, Max, because what seems so obviously anomalous just at the moment, at the time in 1971, would not have seemed so. This is before the grooming gang scandal. This is before so many issues that have developed in the meantime. What was the original thinking behind the loopholes that allowed this man to claim some legal protection from deportation?
I think the principle behind it, put simply, was that if you had come from abroad and you'd been resident here for a particular point of time, then you were entitled to treat the UK as your permanent home. Whereas we know that the British state, the government, is entitled in certain circumstances to deprive citizens of UK citizenship. And that deprivation power, although used sparingly, is a tool that clearly comes into the field of vision when you're dealing with a criminal like this Rochdale grooming gang leader.
All right, now let's talk about the remedy, insofar as there seems to be a remedy, and the Home Secretary is taking action on Monday to change the law with the idea of closing the loophole. But there is always the possibility, Max, as you know better than I do, that when you change the law, you raise further questions and possible further complications.
Yes, and I think the problem here is the distinction between the ability of the government to deprive a citizen of their current residence and the right to remain in this country, which is fine on the one hand, but not fine on the other hand, is by using deprivation to render a citizen stateless because they have no other country to go. And that is what we saw in the Shamima Begum case. Like the Rochdale leader, I make no excuses for the sins that she may have committed, the crimes that she may have committed. But to render someone like her or someone like this individual stateless is against the norms of international law. And my understanding is that this man, Ahmed, whether he ever lived in Pakistan, he certainly hasn't for a long time. And I'm reading that the Pakistan government is refusing to accept him. So just pausing there, you've got to ask the question whether you are simply putting a person in limbo so that no country can deal with him for, let's say, future crimes that may be committed. It can't be right to create a vacuum. I think this story is even more complicated than that, by the way, John.
Yeah.
That's the first problem that I can see here.
All right. Look, do you have a problem with the idea of, if it is the case that Pakistan will not take this man back into its behind its borders, of putting pressure on Pakistan, perhaps by the threat of sanctions? Your thoughts on that, in principle, and as a matter of legal redress?
Well, I have sympathy for a country if that country is entitled to say, look, this man, this woman has never lived here, and just because they have some heritage in our country, we don't see why we should let them in. I have sympathy with that. My understanding, though, is that the Pakistan government is trying to play tit for tat here. What I've been reading today is that they're saying we will only grant this man some status and allow entry if you give us through deportation some other citizens that we're interested in. And that is a problem. Just as rendering a person stateless shouldn't happen under international law, nor should extradition or deprivation of citizenship become a game of tit for tat. Now, it's quite separate to contemplate trade sanctions. That's outside my lane, John, and I don't know whether that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite wrong to say that this is a game of swaps. Each case should be looked at on its individual merits, and the law should be applied both domestically and internationally.
Well, so Pakistan digs in, as you say, you set out what seems to be their terms for taking this man back, which is they want people of interest to Pakistan, including political dissidents. If there's no movement there, if it's a deadlock, we seem to be out of options, do we, Max?
We do, which is why I question in the first place just how far an individual state can go in trying to rid itself of a problem. This man, whom we're discussing this afternoon, committed the most serious form of crimes. He has served a period of time in prison, but I don't know whether he still represents a danger. And I think it's on the UK state to ensure that any danger he does represent is one which is met with the force of the law, and that his victims and those close to those victims are protected by the British state. I can see that there's political expediency in trying to change this very old loophole to try and get rid of the problem. But if that doesn't work, then the British state will have to go about it another way and put the victims of this grooming gang first.
All right. Sir Max Hill, former Director of Public Prosecutions. Good to have you on the show, Max. Thank you.